The dust hangs thick in the air, a choking veil that clings to your throat like a lover's desperate grasp. You hear at first the low rumble of chariot wheels grinding over sun-baked earth, the sharp crack of whips slicing through the murmurs of 1,000 voices. Then the screams erupt, not wild but measured, like stones fed one by one into a mill. Girls, no older than 15, their linen shifts, torn and dirt-streaked, are herded forward by spearmen whose bronze tips glint like false promises under the merciless Syrian sun. They clutch at each other's hands, eyes wide with the animal terror of the young. An Assyrian overseer, his beard oiled and braided, points with a reed stylus, tallying them like ewes at market. 8,000, they say, later in the king's ledgers. 8,000 virgins from the shattered hills of Samaria marched not to fields or forges, but to the shadowed enclosures of the empire's harem's camps, where beauty becomes currency and resistance a forgotten dream. The first one stumbles, her bare feet bleeding into the sand. A soldier yanks her up by the hair. She doesn't cry out. Not yet, but in that silence, the machine of Assyria hums to life, gears turning on the blood of the conquered. And as the line snakes toward the horizon, toward Nineveh's waiting jaws, you wonder, how does a king build an empire on such fragile theft? What you're about to hear involves the forced taking of women, the machinery of deportation, and the cold arithmetic of ancient conquest. These events are drawn from annals and shards unearthed from the earth, but they cut deep. If this stirs something too raw, step away, I'll hold no grudge. For those who stay, we peel back the layers not to wallow in the wound, but to map the gears that ground empires into being. Because understanding the system, that's the quiet rebellion. Imagine, if you will, a river of bronze and ambition carving through the cradle of civilization. It's the 8th century before our common tally, and the world tilts on the edge of chaos. To the east, the Tigris and Euphrates cradle Assyria, a land of mud-brick ziggurats and star-scorched plains, where kings claim descent from gods and wield armies like extensions of their will. For decades, this empire has staggered, plagued by rebellions, squeezed by nomadic raiders from the Zagros peaks, and bled dry by indifferent rulers. Cities like Calah and Nineveh, once pulsing with scribes and smiths, now whisper of decline. But then, in 745 BC, a shadow rises. A man not born to the throne, but forged in its forge, a general named Pul, who seizes power in a coup that smells of blood and palace intrigue. He renames himself Tiglath-Pileser III, invoking an ancient king whose name means, "My trust is in the son of Isara." Trust. What a bitter jest. For in his hands, trust becomes a blade, and Assyria awakens as a predator. This wasn't chaos. This was calculation. Tiglath-Pileser didn't stumble into empire. He engineered it. He shattered the old web of provincial lords, those fat governors who'd grown lazy on tribute, and replaced them with loyalists chained to his vision. Armies that once relied on fickle levies from distant farms, he forged a standing force. Professional killers drilled in the dust of parade grounds, their loyalty bought with land and fear. And the land itself, he redrew its bones, carving provinces like a butcher, portions meat, each fed by canals, dug by captive hands. To the south, Babylon chafed under Chaldean whispers. He crushed them, claiming their crown in 729 BC as if it were a fallen fruit. Northward, Urartu loomed like a mountain storm, but he chipped at its flanks year after year, until their eagles fled. Westward, toward the Mediterranean salt kiss, lay the real prize, the fractured kingdoms of the Levant Phoenician traders with cedar fleets, Aramean city-states glittering like fool's gold, and there, nestled in terraced hills, the stubborn heart of Israel, what the Assyrians called Bit-Humri, the house of Omri. Why did it matter? Because these western lands weren't barren rock. They were veins of silver, tin, and timber, lifelines to Egypt's granaries and the trade winds of the sea. Control them, and Assyria doesn't just survive, it devours. But rebellion simmered there, a pot ready to boil over. Kings like Menahem of Samaria paid tribute in 738 BC, 1,000 talents of silver, wrung from his people like water from a stone to buy a fragile peace. Yet peace in Tiglath-Pileser's world was just a pause between thrusts. By 734 BC, alliances cracked. Damascus and Samaria, fearing the Assyrian shadow, plotted together against the south. Judah trembled. And Tiglath-Pileser, he saw not enemies, but opportunities. His response wasn't fury, it was erasure. Deport the defiant, scatter their seeds, and plant your own. Break the land's memory, and it bends to yours. This machine, humming with ledgers and lashes, would claim 8,000 souls from Samaria's hills, not as an afterthought, but as policy, and in its shadow, a young woman's world would unravel thread by thread. Tiglath-Pileser wasn't spawned from monsters, he was sculpted by them. Born around 795 BC into a royal house fraying at the edges, he grew up in the echo of glory's past tales of his namesake, who hunted lions in the reeds and stacked enemy heads like harvest sheaves. But Assyria's golden age had tarnished. His father, if the king lists whisper true, was Ashur-nirari V, a ruler whose reign was a litany of losses, borders shrinking like parched fields, treasuries echoing empty, whispers of coup in every shadowed corridor. Young Pul, that's what they called him then, a name sharp as a goad, learned early that power wasn't inherited, it was seized. At 16, perhaps, he marched with his first campaign, the air thick with the copper tang of blood, watching as Aramean rebels were flayed and their skins stretched taut on city gates. Not horror, but lesson. Cruelty wasn't waste, it was warning. Mercy, a crack in the wall. By his 30s, he was a general in Calah, the empire's beating heart, where palaces rose like stepped mountains and scribes etched fates on clay. A formative scar came in 746 BC. A rebellion erupts in the city itself, flames licking the night, loyalists clashing with malcontents in streets slick with rain and regret. Pul stands at the vanguard, his bronze scale armor heavy, sword slick. He quells it not with speeches, but steel executing the ringleaders, their heads impaled on spikes along the Tigris, a forest of warnings. The emperor, his kin or not, falls. Pul steps over the corpse, crowns himself Tiglath-Pileser, and vows, no more drift. That night, alone in the throne room, he pores over maps by lamplight, fingers tracing the West's rebellious veins. Urartu to the north, a thorn. Babylon south, a boil. But the Levant, the Levant, with its olive groves and defiant gods, that's the artery to choke. He reforms ruthlessly. Governors demoted to mere taxmen. Armies swelled with mercenaries from the hills. Deportations codified like holy writ. Scatter them, he commands his scribes, as salt on the soil. It's no madness, it's method. The boy who watched skins peel learns to skin nations whole. 3 years into his reign, the turning point arrives like a desert wind. In 742 BC, Arpad, a fortress city in northern Syria, defies him, its walls bristling with Aramean spears. Tiglath-Pileser lays siege, 3 long years of sappers tunneling like moles, rams battering like thunder. Famine gnaws inside. Outside, his engineers build a counterwall, a man-made mountain to starve the stars themselves. When Arpad falls in 740 BC, the king enters not as conqueror, but accountant. He tallies 30,000 deportees, marched east to till Assyrian fields. Women separated, children catalogued, men broken on the wheel of labor. Among the spoil, ivory tusks, gold ingots, and yes, the untouched daughters of the elite, bound for the harems where loyalty is bred in silk and shadow. It's here, in Arpad's dust, that the Samaritan calculus crystallizes. Scouts return with word. Samaria stirs, its king Menahem paying lip service tribute but whispering alliances. Tiglath-Pileser smiles, thin as a blade's edge. Let them pay, he says, until they don't. The machine whirs louder, and in the hills of Israel, a girl named Miriam tends her father's goats, unaware the wind carries the scent of chains. Dawn breaks over the terraced slopes of Samaria like a hesitant promise. It's 732 BC, the air heavy with jasmine and the faint rot of unburied fears. The city of Samaria perches on its hill like a watchful elder, whitewashed walls gleaming against olive groves that cascade down to the Jordan's distant shimmer. Below, in the village of Jezreel, life unfolds in quiet rhythms. Women draw water from stone-ringed wells, their laughter mingling with the bleat of kids. Men mend plows in the shade of fig trees, debating the king's latest levy. The earth here is stubborn, red clay soil that yields barley only after coaxing, but its home woven into songs passed from mother to daughter, gods invoked in every hearth fire. This is Bit-Humri, the house built by Omri 2 centuries past, a kingdom forged from tribal fires into something fiercer. 10 tribes bound by covenant and crown, their Yahweh a jealous flame against the pantheons of the sea. Into this fragile weave steps Miriam. She's 17, with hair like woven midnight and hands calloused from spindle and loom. Daughter of a potter named Eliab, she dreams small marriage to the shepherd's son down the valley, children tumbling in the dust, a life measured in harvests, not headlines. That morning, she rises before the cocks, slipping into a simple wool tunic dyed indigo from the wadi snails. Her mother presses a barley cake into her palm, eyes soft with the unspoken. The king asks much this year. Miriam nods, kisses the doorpost, and leads the goats to pasture. The hills roll gentle underfoot, wild thyme brushing her ankles, the sky a vast, untroubled blue. She hums a fragment of Deborah's song, the warrior woman's triumph over chariots, feeling the earth's pulse in her veins. Unbeknownst to her, Tiglath-Pileser's shadow has already crested the horizon. Scouts from Damascus, fleeing their own fall, have kindled the spark. An alliance against Assyria, Samaria whispering yes. Pekah, the usurper king, sees glory in defiance. But glory is a thief, and it comes cloaked in dust clouds. The confrontation builds like a summer storm. Word arrives at dusk. Riders on lathered horses, their cloaks caked in the grit of Gilead's roads. Assyrians, they gasp. They've taken Ijon, Abel, Beth-Maacah, the whole north. Miriam's father bolts the door, his potter's hands trembling as he lights the lamps. Outside, the village elders gather under the tamarisk, voices rising like smoke. Pekah swore tribute, why this? But Pekah's envoys arrive at midnight, faces grim as flint. The eagle from the east demands more than silver. He wants our knees. Demands cascade. Surrender Galilee, Naphtali, the fertile crescent that feeds the capital. Pekah refuses, his pride a shield rusted thin. Miriam listens from the rooftop, the night air cool on her skin, stars wheeling like indifferent eyes. By dawn, the ground trembles chariots, thousands strong, their iron-rimmed wheels carving ruts like wounds. Assyrian banners snap, the god Ashur's winged disk devouring the sun. Tiglath-Pileser doesn't lead personally. He sends Nabu-Shar-Usur, a secondary captain whose name means Nabu protect the king, a man whose eyes hold the dead fish gleam of the faithful enforcer. Nabu-Shar-Usur halts the host at Hazor's gates, not with siege engines, but envoys bearing clay tablets sealed in lapis. Submit or scatter. The refusal comes swift as an arrow's release. Pekah's archers loose volleys from the walls, shafts whispering death into the van. Nabu-Shar-Usur doesn't flinch. He signals, and the machine engages. Sappers swarm with mattocks, undermining the foundations. Archers return fire in sheets, blotting the sky. Miriam's village, miles distant, feels the echo, a low thunder that sets the goats stamping. Days blur into siege. Hazor falls in a roar of flame, its king flayed alive on the ramparts, skin stretched as a banner of warning. Then Kadesh, Genoa, town after town, crumples like parchment in fire. The Assyrians move methodical, not frenzied, each conquest a notch on the tally stick. By week's end, they've carved a swath through Naphtali, deporting the able-bodied in iron collars. Families rent like cloth. Miriam's world shrinks, her father's kiln cold, the groves stripped for Assyrian fires. Whispers turn to wails as columns of captives snake east men to quarries, boys to bowyers' guilds, the women vanish into guarded wagons, their fates murmured in the dark. Harems in Calah, where the king's sons await brides of conquest. The act itself unfolds in the shadow of Samaria's walls, restrained as a scribe's flourish. Nabu-Shar-Usur, under sealed orders, bypasses the capital Pekah's rump state can fester for now. Instead, he fans out into the hills, villages like Miriam's marked on maps drawn from spies' tongues. Dawn of the third day, soldiers flood Jezreel, their boots thudding like heartbeats. No battle here. Resistance crumbles under the weight of inevitability. Eliab barters his life's work, pots shattered for mercy. But mercy is a myth. The virgins, the captain barks, voice flat as river reed, unblemished for the king's camps. Miriam, hidden in the storeroom, feels hands seize her rough, but efficient, like gleaners in a field. No screams mar the ledger, the stylus scratches. 8,000, tallied from a dozen such hamlets, the flower of Samaria's youth winnowed for the empire's beds. She's bound with her sisters in sorrow. A line of wide-eyed ghosts march to holding pens ringed by stakes. There, in the lee of a bluff, wagons wait canvas shrouded, drawn by oxen lowing like dirges. The loading is silent work. One by one, they climb, the air inside thick with the salt of unshed tears. As the convoy lurches east, Miriam presses her palm to the slat, glimpsing her village recede a smudge of smoke and stone. The machine doesn't rage, it simply takes. Word spreads like fever through the remnant. Pekah flees to the hills, slain by his own in a coup that reeks of Assyrian gold. Hoshea, his assassin, sues for vassalage, but the damage festers. Villages empty, their hearths cold as accusations. In Samaria's markets, widows haggle over scraps, their daughters' names unspoken ghosts. Nabu-shar-uzur reports to the king, Bit-Humri broken, its seeds scattered, 8,000 for the harems, laborers for the canals. Tiglath-Pileser nods, inking the annals. I led them to Assyria, their possessions mine. This wasn't about Miriam or the girl beside her who sang of lost loves under her breath. This was the system flexing deportation as scalpel, slicing identities to prevent regrowth. Historians later tally the toll. Nearly 30,000 from the north alone, resettled in Calah and the Habor's bends, their languages fraying like old rope. One brief echo today. Modern borders, drawn in blood, where refugees trudge similar paths, herded by states that count lives like chits. The machine endures, oiled by forgetting. But Miriam, in the wagon's sway, she clutches a shard of her father's pot, whispering prayers to a god who, for now, seems as distant as the sea. But that wasn't the worst part. As the convoys snaked toward Calah, Nabu-shar-uzur rode ahead, his mind turning not to glory, but gears. From his vantage, a mid-rank enforcer, risen from scribal halls to spearhead, he saw the king's genius plain, cruelty as commerce. He'd overseen a dozen such takings, from Aramean hamlets to Babylonian barges, each a thread in the web. Now, shifting the lens to the harems, the true calculus emerged. These weren't mere pleasure dens, they were breeding pens for loyalty, where Samaritan blood mingled with Assyrian, birthing soldiers who owed no tribe but the throne. Nabu-shar-uzur paused at a way station, the air sharp with cardamom from eastern caravans, and unrolled a dispatch. Sort the virgins by lineage priests' daughters to inner courts, common to outer. 8,000, unbroken, to swell the king's line. He grimaced, not from pity, but efficiency. Last year's haul from Damascus had yielded fractious stock 2 suicides in the first moon, whispers of Yahweh poisoning the well. Samaria's girls, though? Fervent but pliant, their god a tale of exodus that mirrored their own. The spread unfolded like ink in water. From Jezreel, the machinery radiated, detachments to Bethel, Shiloh, the high places where altars smoked to alien gods. Incentives greased the wheels, promotion for captains who filled quotas, floggings for delays. Reports flowed back in cuneiform haste. From Naphtali, 1,200, Galilee, near 2,000. Whole clans uprooted, not with fire, but files. Census takers marking hearths, herders driving flocks east, alongside the human tide. Nabu-shar-uzur witnessed one pivot in Gilead's wadis, where a shepherd face etched like old leather bartered his flock for his daughter's release. The captain refused, eyes on the tally. The system needs her, he muttered, as if to a god of ledgers. Numbers became flesh, villages hollowed, their synagogues silent, fields fallow under new overseers from Media's flanks. Yet here's the breather, the ironic hush amid the grind. In one convoy's halt, under a canopy of acacia, a girl, not Miriam, but close, slips a flute from her hem, piping a melody of reed and river. The guards pause, spears lowering, even stone hearts crave song. For a breath, the machine idles, and the stars above seem almost kind. Escalation crested not in blood, but in the quiet horror of assimilation. Nabu-shar-uzur, back in Calah's sprawl mud walls, rising like a fever dream, oversaw the intake. The harems sprawled on the city's edge, enclosures of cedar and clay, veiled in myrtle and guarded by eunuchs whose eyes held castrated wisdom. 8,000 arrived in waves, sorted like grain, the fairest to the king's pavilion, others to provincial lords, their names exchanged for numbers on wax. This one, for the crown prince, a steward would intone, leading a trembling line to baths of rose-water and oil, where barbers sheared not just hair, but heritage. Nabushar-Usur walked the paths once, the air heavy with incense, masking despair. A survivor he'd known from Arpad, a woman who'd clawed free from earlier chains, tended the looms now, her fingers weaving tapestries of lions devouring lambs. "They break you slow," she whispered, needle flashing. "First the name, then the god." He nodded, filing the report. Yields projected generations of hybrid heirs, loyal to the disk of Ashur. The system spread its shadow further. Incentives for breeders, allotments of land for the compliant. In the east, Samaritan men dug canals, their sweat feeding fields that once starved under Urartu's raids. But the crack showed in the ledger's desertions, whispers of revolt in the pens. Tiglath-Pileser, from his throne of ivory and iron, adjusted. More guards, fewer mercies. The machine adapted, devouring its own doubts. Time slows in the heart of the breaking, the air thickening to honey and ash. It's the 40th day of the march, or the 50th. The sun blurs them into one endless scorch. Miriam, wedged in the wagon's press, feels the world contract to slats and sweat. The convoy crests a ridge near the Habor's bend, the river a silver serpent coiling through reed-choked marshes. Here, the harems begin not grand halls, but way camps, palisades of thorn and post, ringed by fires that spit sparks into the dusk. Sensory assault hits like a wave. The bleat of goats from distant herds, the sizzle of lamb on spits mingling with unwashed fear, the ground soft underfoot, mud sucking at ankles like reluctant lovers. Guards bark orders in Akkadian gutturals, herding the line toward enclosures where lamplight flickers on faces pale as milkweed. Miriam's turn comes at twilight, the sky bruising purple. A eunuch face smooth as polished stone, voice a silk rasp circles her, prodding like a buyer at auction. Unmarked, he notes, stylus scratching clay. She stands rigid, the shard in her fist-cutting palm, blood-warm as a secret. The climax creaks open like a gate in fog. No grand violation here. The annals skip the flesh, focusing on yield. But implication hangs heavy. The inner pens, where lords in linen robes await, their appetites sharpened by conquest. Miriam's group, 50 strong, priest daughters mostly, is led through torchlit paths, the air turning cloying with myrrh and musk. Doors creak, shadows merge. Outside, a sister moans once, sharp as shattered pot, then silence swallows it. The machine peaks in this, not the act, but the erasure the god of her fathers reduced to mutter in the dark, her body a vessel for the enemy's seed. Nabushar-Usur, patrolling the perimeter, hears fragments, a hymn stifled, a plea in Hebrew that dissolves into sobs. He turns away, not from shame, but schedule. Dawn brings the crack, the overreach that echoes. One girl, bolder than fear, slips a cord from her hem, fashions a noose from tent peg and rope. Her body sways at morning's light, a pendulum of defiance. Guards cut her down, but whispers ripple. Yahweh sees. Reports fly to the king, suicides in the third wave, morale fracturing. Tiglath-Pileser, in Nineveh's cool halls, paces. The system, for all its grind, bleeds at the edges. He doubles the watchers, but the seed is sown resistance, not in swords, but silence. Miriam, spared the inner dark by some steward's whim, toils in outer looms, her shard hidden, her song buried but beating. Tiglath-Pileser died in 727 BC, not in battle's blaze, but quietly, perhaps from the gnaw of old wounds or the empire's weight. His son Shalmaneser V inherited the throne, the machine still whirring, but gears already slipping. Samaria held a breath longer, 3 years of siege under the new king, walls cracking under rams and famine before falling in 722 BC. The remnant deported, 27,000, say the annals, to Calah and the Khabur's forks, their places filled by exiles from Babylon and Cutha. Hoshea vanished into chains. Pekah's line ended in dust. Power shifted east, Assyria's maw widening to swallow Tyre's harbors and Jerusalem's tribute. But the west festered Judah's scheming. Egypt lurking like a crocodile in reeds. Long term, the deportations bore bitter fruit. Hybrid cultures in the east, Samaritans in the hills blending Yahweh with Ashur, a people scorned by their southern kin as mongrels. Ironic twist. The ledgers meant to glorify Tiglath-Pileser slabs, etched with boasts of broken nations, now testify against him. Their cuneiform, a silent accusation in museum glass. The empire he built endured a century more, crumbling under Babylon's hammer, but his machine? It echoes in every forced march since. Dust settles on the digs of yesterday, but the earth yields its grudging truths. In 1845, along the Tigris's bend at Nimrud, ancient Calah, an Englishman named Austen Henry Layard thrust spade into soil, chasing legends of Nineveh's glories. What he unearthed wasn't just palaces of alabaster and lapis, but ghosts, wall slabs carved with processions of deportees, their faces etched in eternal march, clay prisms scripted with Tiglath-Pileser's annals, boasting of Bit-Humri's inhabitants, led away in fetters. One fragment, pieced from shards like a mended heart, tallies the West's fall. Hazor taken, Galilee emptied, 8,000 souls not named, but numbered for the Harem's shadowed quotas. Layard, sweat-streaked under the Mesopotamian blaze, traced fingers over the reliefs, women with bound hands, wagons groaning under human weight. A system of terror, he wrote in dispatches home, his voice trembling on paper. Later excavations at Samaria's Hill in 1908, Harvard's teams sifting strata of ash and ivory uncovered the void, a destruction layer from 732 BC, hearths cold, ivory plaques shattered like dreams. No mass graves, the machine was too efficient for that. But in the Habor's modern bends, Kurdish villagers till fields where Samaritan ghosts once prayed, unearthing bullae stamped with Yahweh's name, tiny seals whispering of lost lineages. Why does it matter, this echo from baked clay? Because power's anatomy hasn't changed, it's still that cold calculus, counting lives like coins, scattering the defiant to prevent roots. Look to our maps, borders redrawn by decree, families herded across seas in boats that sink like stones, young women tallied in camps where hope frays to thread. Tiglath-Pileser's harems weren't aberration, they were blueprint, a lesson in how empires breed by breaking. Yet here's the universal pulse. Resistance isn't in the roar, but the hidden shard, the song stifled but sung in secret. Human nature bends, but doesn't snap, it remembers, it remakes. In Miriam's grip on that potter's fragment, we see it. The small defiance that outlasts kings. Return now to that ridge near the Habor, wagons creaking into twilight. The line has thinned suicides, illnesses claiming their toll, but Miriam endures, shard warm in her fist. What changed? The hills behind her smoke. Ahead, the river mocks with its endless flow. But in the pen's hush, as a guard's back turns, she scratches the clay wall. A single mark, like a lamb's crook, Yahweh's ancient Tau. It's nothing, a scratch in mud, yet empires fall to such nothings. Those 8,000 were meant to vanish, swallowed into harems, their songs silenced, their blood diluted to ink the annals. But they didn't. They persist in the prisms Layard hauled from the sand, in the Bible's bitter verses of exile, in the Samaritan scrolls hidden on Gerizim's peak. Their descendants, scattered seeds, blooming in unexpected soils, from Kurdish tales to Jewish laments. And now they're here with you, in this telling, because you chose to listen. Their machine ground on. But memory? That's the counter gear, turning slow but sure. If this stirred something in you, the grind of the system, the quiet fire of the unbroken, drop a comment below. What's one shard you've held onto through your own marches? Your voice keeps their story spinning. And remember, the best histories aren't the ones that end. They're the ones we carry forward.